Adrian had never been particularly good at following directions, a fact that had earned him more reprimands than medals on the orbital station Selene 9, but it was somehow a perfect preparation for the absurdity that awaited him that night. He floated past the observation dome, headphones bouncing against his helmet as he hummed a tune he wasn't sure he remembered learning. Outside, the void stretched endlessly, stars like pinpricks in black velvet, and somewhere beyond the station's reinforced hull, the cosmos whispered secrets he wasn't technically qualified to understand. That's when the anomaly appeared, a shimmer, a ripple of space folding over itself in a way that made Adrian squint and mutter, "Well, that's not supposed to happen, I think." He pressed his face to the observation port just in time to see a craft emerging, its surface a fluid silver that shifted as though alive, and yet it had no engines, no visible means of propulsion. The station's alarms failed to register anything, because nothing about this was in the database, Adrian's database, the station's database, or apparently the universe's database at large. The anomaly pulsed once, then twice, and Adrian leaned closer until he felt the slight tug of the station's gravity compensators trying desperately to keep him from smacking his face into the glass. The hatch of the alien craft opened with a quiet sigh, like a door stretching after a long nap, and then she stepped out. She could have been a human woman, at least at first glance. Her form was slender and symmetrical, her skin a pale, luminous ivory, but the ears, those long, elegant ears that tapered to gentle points, shifted like radar dishes, catching every vibration of the surrounding space. They twitched when she moved her head, and for a moment Adrian wondered if they were calculating, scanning, or simply decorative. She smiled, which was absurdly disarming given the context of interstellar invasion or contact, or whatever protocol Selene 9 had forgotten to include in its training manual. Adrian, in a perfect display of human grace, tripped over the nearest maintenance cable and nearly somersaulted into the observation glass. He caught himself with one hand, the other flailing hopelessly, and managed a weak hello. The alien's voice was smooth, melodic, and entirely in English, which technically he knew she shouldn't speak, but shrugged, because apparently aliens had better linguistics programs than the entire United Nations. "Humans never stop being clumsy, do they?" she said, and her ears twitched in amusement. Adrian blinked, unsure if he was being insulted or complimented, but leaned into the flattery anyway. I can be elegant when I'm awake," he stammered. She raised a perfectly arched eyebrow and floated closer, her movements graceful, almost liquid, ignoring the laws of momentum like she had made her own. "You are awake," she said, "and yet you stumble." She tilted her head, and Adrian realized that if someone had told him this was how an alien queen would judge humanity, he would have said, "Well, at least she has a sense of humor." Then came the moment that would define the rest of his life. She gestured toward him with a hand that seemed both delicate and infinitely powerful, and Adrian, ignoring every shred of reason, floated forward. His foot caught another cable which yanked him sideways, and he collided softly into her. There was a flash of light, a warmth that didn't belong to the station, and for a brief, hilarious, terrifying instant, he feared he had offended interstellar law by touching royalty without proper ceremonial apology. She laughed, not the laugh of a predator or a queen scolding her subjects, but a light, teasing laugh, as if the universe itself had played a practical joke on him and she was thoroughly enjoying it. "Clumsy humans," she said again, and this time Adrian thought he saw something almost like admiration flicker across her face. Her eyes, an unearthly shade of violet that seemed to hold stars within them, studied him, assessing not just his form but the chaos of his nervous energy, the tiny miscalculations, the improbable courage it took to exist at all in front of a being like her. The station system sputtered, confused by the craft's presence. Lights flickered, doors cycled on and off, and somewhere in the corridors the AI muttered what might have been a swear word in several languages. Adrian tried to play it cool. "So, you come in peace?" he asked, hands tucked neatly behind his back, which only succeeded in making him look like a particularly awkward penguin in zero gravity. She tilted her head again, long ears twitching. "Peace is relative," she said, her voice like wind over distant planets. "But curiosity is absolute." Her words made no sense, yet Adrian felt them in his chest like a gentle pulse. He opened his mouth to respond, but the AI interrupted with an unintelligible alarm. prompting him to trip over another stray tool and nearly drift into the observation deck. "You are different," she said, as if noting the detail of his clumsiness was a vital insight into human nature. Adrian, always the one to seize awkward moments for comic relief, replied, "Yes, differently awkward." She considered this, then smiled, and for a moment, the station, the stars, and the universe beyond all seemed to align in silent acknowledgement that something ridiculous and extraordinary was happening. Over the next few hours, or what passed for hours in a place where time had a habit of bending, Adrian attempted to converse with her, each sentence a careful negotiation between scientific curiosity and catastrophic social failure. He asked about her people, about the ship, about why humans always trip. She answered in riddles, in jokes, in glimmers of telepathy, and Adrian laughed so often he worried the others on the station might report him for delirium. She seemed amused by his humanity, its chaos, its impulsive gestures, its inability to predict the universe with neat equations. By the time the anomaly began to shimmer again, signaling the alien craft's departure, Adrian had realized three things. 1. He was almost certainly the most accident-prone human in the sector. 2. He was completely enthralled by a being who could have ended his existence in 1,000 elegant ways, but instead seemed fascinated by his inelegance. 3. And most dangerously, he had a nagging suspicion that the alien queen, long ears twitching in amused judgment, had chosen him or something about him for reasons he did not yet understand. As the craft disappeared into the shimmer, leaving the observation dome silent and the stars humming their indifferent song, Adrian sank to the floor in a tangle of cables and limbs, muttering to himself, "Well, that happened." The station AI sighed. Somewhere in the infinite black, a queen laughed, and Adrian, human, awkward, and completely unprepared, understood in a very small, very terrified part of his brain that his life had changed forever. Adrian's first week among the alien court was a test of human resilience, ingenuity, and, apparently, gravity-defying slapstick. When he had imagined first contact with extraterrestrial royalty, he pictured protocol, diplomacy, and at least one dramatic exchange involving cosmic metaphors. Instead, he got a labyrinth of floating platforms, holographic menus, and an unspoken expectation that he would somehow interpret telepathic etiquette while keeping his lunch from floating away. The queen, for her part, seemed to oscillate between amused observation and quiet exasperation, her long ears twitching whenever he flinched, stumbled, or misinterpreted a pheromonal cue as a subtle insult. The alien court was a marvel of logic and absurdity combined. Advisors floated in zero gravity on platforms that hovered a fraction above the ground, their robes shimmering with colors that shifted depending on the angle of thought, or perhaps the emotional state they projected. Conversations were layered, half spoken in clicks and tonal shifts, half telepathic and punctuated by glances that could convey a reprimand, a suggestion, or the secret location of dessert. Adrian had accidentally interpreted one glimmer of thought as an order to dance, which resulted in a 3-minute floating pirouette that ended with him smacking into a console and triggering an emergency light sequence. The queen's reaction had been a quiet chuckle that resonated like a bell in his chest, a sound that made him want to both apologize and impress her simultaneously, a combination that was proving nearly impossible to achieve. Meals were another ordeal. The cuisine was interstellar in every sense. Some dishes were liquid yet solid at the same time, others sang faint harmonic tones when consumed. Adrian discovered, after a brief and embarrassing mishap involving a glowing gelatinous sphere and the court's central console, that some dishes were telepathically interactive. An alien delicacy would change flavor depending on the eater's emotions. His nervous laughter produced a taste explosion that caused a minor alarm. The queen raised one slender hand, her ears flicking with mild amusement, and said, "You're humans, unpredictable in every dimension." Adrian nodded sagely, which only caused his drink to levitate and ricochet off the walls. "Yes, well, predictability is overrated," he offered, which earned him a faint but approving smile. It was during one of the formal council sessions that the scandal truly erupted. Adrian had been asked to accompany the queen as an observer, a euphemism, he soon realized, for don't touch anything, don't embarrass yourself, and above all, don't show the court how human beings trip over air. He had managed to keep both feet on a platform for approximately 4 minutes before the telepathic whispers of the advisors confused him. One suggested, in a tone that could have been mistaken for both warning and praise, that Adrian was remarkably inefficient but oddly entertaining, which led him to bow at precisely the wrong angle and nearly tumble into the grand holographic star map, a three-dimensional projection of multiple galaxies swirling in radiant hues. The Queen's ears twitched, a gesture Adrian took as a sign that he was still alive and welcome. Between the fiascos, he began to notice patterns. The Queen observed everything, from the smallest hand movement to the flicker of emotion across his face. Her judgment was not based on ability but on intent, curiosity, and the capacity to endure the absurd. One afternoon, as Adrian floated among corridors lined with iridescent panels, he asked a question that had been nagging him. "Why me? I mean, why not one of your own?" The Queen's eyes glimmered like distant nebulae, and for a moment she seemed to weigh her response across centuries of tradition and expectation. "Because curiosity is not measured by ancestry," she said softly, "and you are not what I expected. You question, you stumble, and you laugh. You remind me that even perfection is overrated." Adrian attempted a witty reply which came out as, "So, basically I'm perfect in an imperfect way." She let out a low, throaty laugh that made the air itself feel warmer, and Adrian decided that perhaps miscommunication was a perfectly acceptable form of connection. The Queen introduced him to the more advanced elements of her culture. He learned about the telepathic nuances, the subtle manipulations of light and gravity in conversation, and the ceremonial uses of pheromones. A lesson that ended disastrously when Adrian accidentally emitted a signal of friendliness so strong that one of the advisors fainted in shock. He apologized profusely, stumbled backward, and only avoided catastrophe because the Queen reached out and steadied him with one hand. Her touch, light and deliberate, carried a weight of authority and amusement that left him flustered, muttering under his breath about humans being notoriously unprepared for alien elegance. Despite or perhaps because of the constant hazards, Adrian began to bond with the Queen. Humor became their shared language. She would hide objects on purpose, watching him search with exaggerated panic, and he would return the favor by inventing ridiculous challenges, like floating a tray of glowing spheres through a zero-gravity obstacle course while reciting human poetry, often mispronouncing half the words. Each time, the Queen laughed, not politely, but genuinely, her ears flicking in delighted judgment. And Adrian felt that he was learning to communicate in ways that transcended words, rituals, and even gravity. Political tensions simmered in the background, though Adrian barely noticed. His presence was unprecedented, and the court was torn between scandal and fascination. Some advisors whispered that he was a dangerous anomaly, others suggested he might be a key to alliances not yet imagined. Adrian, for his part, was mostly concerned with not spilling anything on the Queen, not accidentally rearranging the holographic galaxy and keeping his limbs attached. His laughter became a kind of armor, his bumbling a bridge between alien formality and human unpredictability. One evening, floating in the observation chamber above a sea of glittering stars, Adrian asked the question that had haunted him since his arrival. "So, you chose me, why?" The Queen's eyes reflected constellations unknown to human astronomers, and for the first time her expression softened into something intimate and rare. "Because you remind me," she said, her voice both gentle and teasing, "that the universe is as much about mistakes as it is about precision. And because you laugh even when the cosmos should terrify you." Adrian, in response, tripped over the edge of the observation platform and nearly fell into the gravity well that simulated nearby planetary bodies. She caught him effortlessly, ears twitching, and he realized with a ridiculous sense of wonder that he had survived another week in her court, largely unscathed, partly ridiculous, and entirely captivated. Humor, it seemed, was the most essential survival skill in a place where the rules of physics, etiquette, and interstellar politics were constantly in flux. As he floated back to his quarters that night, Adrian considered the absurdity of his situation. Humans were clumsy, stubborn, and occasionally brilliant in unexpected ways, and yet here he was, the unwitting center of interstellar curiosity, sharing jokes and mishaps with a being centuries older than the stars themselves. Somewhere deep in the Queen's chambers, her long ears flicked once in amusement, acknowledging that he had passed, barely, often humorously, but undeniably, into a position no human had ever held before. The court remained a labyrinth of wonder and peril, but for Adrian, the humor, the missteps, and the unexpected connection with the alien queen made the labyrinth not just bearable, but exhilarating. Adrian floated into the grand hall of the alien palace with a confidence that was entirely new and entirely his own, or at least, new for someone who had tripped over every cable, console, and floating advisor in the last fortnight. Today was not a day for accidents, he told himself, though gravity had a habit of ignoring human intention, and so he clutched the rail of the observation platform like a life preserver in a stormy sea. The court was assembled, advisors shimmering in their iridescent robes, projecting thoughts and emotions in layers so intricate that Adrian was sure he only understood about 10% of what was being communicated. The queen waited at the center, her long ears tilted forward, eyes like twin violet suns focused on him, and Adrian realized that this was the day he would either solidify his place in her world or provide comic relief for generations of alien historians. The council began with ritual greetings, a symphony of telepathic whispers, low hums, and subtle pheromonal flourishes. Adrian, having rehearsed the human equivalent of a bow, executed a floating curtsy that went slightly off-axis, sending a tray of hovering crystalline spheres tumbling across the hall. The spheres bounced harmlessly, emitting melodic tones on contact with the floor, and Adrian muttered under his breath, "I swear I practiced this at home." The queen's ears twitched once and she said, "You are entirely predictable in your unpredictability." Her words, though teasing, carried a weight of acceptance. Adrian smiled. If nothing else, he had mastered one vital skill in the alien court, making an impression that no one could ignore. The real test began when the council presented a dilemma. An interstellar anomaly threatening the borders of the Queen's domain, a tear in spacetime that could unravel nearby systems if left unchecked. The advisors offered a series of complex, near-impossible solutions, each contingent on precise manipulation of exotic energies that Adrian could barely conceptualize. Normally, he would have panicked, but weeks among the Queen and her court had taught him the most essential lesson. Chaos could be harnessed, and humor could be a tool as sharp as any quantum manipulator. He offered a solution that combined human improvisation with alien technology, sketching his plan on a hollow pad with shaky hands but unflinching intent. The advisors frowned, debated, and finally, reluctantly, agreed to trust the human anomaly. The Queen's smile was a subtle curve, her ears flicking in satisfaction, and Adrian felt a thrill of pride. He was no longer just a clumsy observer, he was a participant in shaping the cosmos. As the plan was set in motion, Adrian found himself in the control chamber, monitoring streams of energy that shimmered in colors unknown to human eyes. The anomaly responded to his adjustments, bending, twisting, and finally stabilizing, as if acknowledging the strange, chaotic logic of a human mind. A minor explosion of harmless plasma arcs illuminated the chamber, and Adrian ducked reflexively, muttering, "Well, that could have gone worse." The Queen appeared beside him, silent, radiating a presence that made the control room feel simultaneously small and infinite. "You have learned more than I expected," she said, "not just about my people or the cosmos, but about yourself." Adrian laughed, the sound bouncing oddly in the low-gravity chamber. "I've learned that gravity is optional, chaos is mandatory, and apparently humans can occasionally be useful." She tilted her head, amused, ears twitching as though agreeing silently. Useful and unpredictable, a rare combination. Adrian realized then that he had changed. Where once he had been cautious, awkward, and deferential, he had learned to trust his instincts, embrace mistakes, and find humor even in the vast unknown. His humanity, flawed and unpolished, had become an asset in a world that prized precision above all else. With the crisis averted, the court reconvened to acknowledge the human's contribution. Speeches were delivered in tones both telepathic and spoken, some filled with praise, others with thinly veiled concern for breaking tradition, and Adrian floated through it all, smiling, bowing, and occasionally ducking to avoid inadvertent collisions. The Queen, at the center of it all, finally spoke. "The human you see before you is not merely a visitor nor a curiosity. He is a choice. a challenge to our expectations, and a reminder that even in the ordered universe, laughter, error, and courage are forces to be reckoned with. The court murmured, some in awe, some in reluctant acceptance, and Adrian realized that he had not only survived but had become an emblem of something larger, the bridge between human chaos and alien order. Later, in the quiet of her private chambers, the queen guided him through the observatory, where a holographic map of countless galaxies spun silently. Adrian floated beside her, no longer afraid, no longer floundering, and he felt an odd sense of belonging. I still don't understand why you chose me, he said, though now the words carried no awkwardness, only genuine curiosity. She looked at him, long ears flicking, eyes luminous. Because you see the universe as it is, not only as it should be, she said. And because you remind me that even the most precise calculations cannot predict wonder or laughter. Adrian smiled, the weight of his journey settling in him like gravity finally acknowledged. So, chaos and mistakes, they have value, he said, almost to himself. She nodded, her hand brushing briefly against his, a gesture that conveyed both intimacy and infinite authority. The stars beyond the observatory shimmered, indifferent yet spectacular. And for the first time, Adrian felt that he was not just an observer of the cosmos but a participant in its unfolding story. The final days on the station passed in a rhythm both strange and comforting. Adrian learned the subtleties of alien customs, mastered some of the telepathic cues, and even managed to float through a zero-gravity banquet without setting anything on fire or off. He joked with the advisors, teasing them with exaggerated human clumsiness that they had come to find endearing, and in turn, they began to see the humor in their rigid traditions. The queen observed quietly, occasionally interjecting with a teasing comment, her long ears twitching with amusement. Adrian realized that trust, humor, and humility were bridges between worlds, perhaps even more than technology or diplomacy. On the day he was to return to human space, Adrian stood at the edge of the observation dome, looking at the stars he had once only studied from afar. The queen appeared beside him, serene and radiant. "You are ready," she said simply. "Not to leave, but to remember." He nodded, understanding that the lessons he had learned, the laughter, the mistakes, the improbable triumphs would stay with him, shaping not only his future but the way he would see the universe. He looked at her, the alien queen who had defied tradition and chosen a human, and felt a sense of gratitude and awe. "I'll try to be worthy of your chaos," he said, a half-joke,